Hi, my name is
Hi.
Nidhi Sharma. I'm the assistant news editor for CEP magazine, which is AICHE's monthly publication. I'm going to be interviewing Erin Cech, who is a professor of sociology at the University of Michigan. My guest is responsible for a recent climate report that examines the experiences of women, minorities, disabled individuals, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer members of AICHE, or LGBTQ. So, Erin, could you tell me a little bit about the logistics of the survey, kind of how many questions there were and how many people you surveyed?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a large national level study focused on members of STEM-related professional organizations and associations. So at this point, we have 21 professional organizations that have participated, and we have about 27,000 respondents at this point.
Wow.
So we partnered with the leadership of each of these organizations with the thought that the best way to understand diversity and inclusion issues within those organizations and broadly within STEM is to understand what's going on in the day-to-day experiences, workplaces of STEM professionals in these organizations.
That's kind of what I was going to ask you, like what inspired you to conduct this survey?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of great broad level data out there on the experiences of individuals in STEM, but we don't have good enough data on the experiences of LGBTQ persons with disabilities, people of color, and especially how those things are intersectional. So for example, what's the experience of a queer woman of color? We don't know how to answer those with survey data yet. And so that was the goal, is to get a much more nuanced understanding of these patterns to better lead us to address these issues.
Okay. So what were some major takeaways from the survey?
Absolutely. So overall, across all of the professional organizations in STEM that we surveyed, one of the major findings was gender inequality. So across almost every single indicator that we measured, women are significantly marginalized, and their contribution to their workplace is devalued compared to men who have similar education levels, experience, or on the same sector, on the same STEM discipline. So persistent gender disadvantages. But we also see disadvantages for people of color within STEM and LGBTQ individuals and persons with disabilities. So these biases are persistent and are across all the STEM organizations that we studied, regardless of the discipline. And they're particularly...
That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting patterns that we see is that it's worst in university college sector compared to what's going on in industry and in not-for-profit sector. It's the worst in university and colleges.
Wow. And you work at a university.
I do.
So you use the term devalued. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So when we think about the experiences for people who are marginalized within STEM, we often think about them being socially marginalized. So they don't get invited out for lunch or coffee, or they're not included in the in-group. But another axis of inequality is whether their professional work is valued, whether they seem like they're given credit for their scientific and engineering knowledge, whether people respect the work that they do. And I think that's a particularly pernicious problem in STEM.
In science, yeah. Because it's such an important part, your research, your work. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, having conducted the survey and analyzed the data, how do you think that we can amend some of the observations that you've taken from the survey?
Absolutely. So I will say that there's really no silver bullet, right? If we had one, we would have been able to solve these problems 30 years ago. I think one of the most important things that we can do is have these conversations. So I really applaud the organizations who have participated in this study, because it's a jumping off point to say what is going on among our members and how do we begin to address these things. So laying the foundation for the legitimacy of conversations about diversity and inclusion is extraordinarily important, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is for organizations and workplaces and university departments to say, we are going to take seriously conversations about diversity and inequality.
Well, we're having one right now.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to ask you, this is kind of a hot topic right now, is the issue of privilege.
Yeah.
And we talked kind of about the negative spectrum or I guess people who are a little bit at a disadvantage in companies, in universities, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So are there individuals that you have observed over and over that consistently have more privilege in these situations?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So if you look across people within who are privileged across multiple axes of difference, so by gender, by race, ethnicity, by LGBTQ status, by class background, by disability status, each time an individual is in a privileged position in one of those axes of difference, that gives them a little bit of a benefit over people who don't necessarily have those. That doesn't necessarily mean that individuals who have that privilege feel like they're privileged. They may have worked very, very hard and are in their position because they put in the work, but they don't experience the same kinds of disadvantages as people who are
Which can be very subtle.
Absolutely, very subtle, but they can accumulate over time. So what I like to say is even a 1% lower chance of getting a grant or getting a paper published or getting into grad school over the course of one's career, those little 1% can add up to enormous differences. And so that's the kind of disadvantage versus privilege we're talking about.
Okay, so I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with the AIChE community. Those are all the questions that I have.
Great, thank you.